So I've reviewed quite a number of games throughout the years, and I don't think I've ever once deleted a review, even for reviews that the community, a large portion of the community disagreed in terms of my opinions. I held my ground because I felt it was ultimately my genuine opinion of the game after having played it extensively. But with Cyberpunk 2077, it's different, because this is a review where I feel I certainly didn't do my due diligence. It's a review from someone who rushed through the campaign and the overall experience instead of taking his time. It's a review from someone who put way too much trust in CD Projekt Red, and it's a review from someone who got way too caught up in the hype. Now, don't get me wrong, I really did mean it when I said in my review that I overall did have a really good time with the game when it wasn't getting in the way of itself and when things worked. I still love my time with the game's characters, the quests, the stories, the campaign. I still find aspects of the game's presentation impressive, though others obviously not so much. I still think Night City itself does look gorgeous, even though as a simulation it obviously falls woefully short. I generally had a good time with the gameplay, with the stealthy build that I went for, and I do know that there are tons of people out there who did have a good time with the game. And then there are, of course, those who didn't, and that's totally understandable. Despite all of that, my review didn't paint a full picture. I certainly went way too easy on this game in a way that I wouldn't have with other games or companies, and the review just shouldn't be up. And to elaborate on all of this, I'd like to reflect on everything leading up to the launch of Cyberpunk 2077 from my perspective, and letting you know where I think I went wrong with this review and how I should have maybe better approached it. But, the hype began all the way back in 2012 when CD Projekt Red announced that they were working on a Cyberpunk title, and I was immediately on board. This was during a time when CD Projekt still had a great standing with the community, and they were seen as the gold standard of how AAA developers should conduct themselves in terms of quality and consumer friendliness. And, as a huge nerd of the cyberpunk genre, that was the cherry on top. And so when Marcin Iwiński bullet pointed what the studio wanted out of Cyberpunk 2077, when I saw the teaser trailer and the style that it was going for, and when I saw CD Projekt Red's commitment to releasing this game when it's ready, a message that they touted time and again, I felt that this could turn out to be the game of my dreams, as did a lot of people. And this was doubly true when Witcher 3 came out in 2015 and it was met with critical acclaim, and CD Projekt ended up delivering one of the most incredible RPGs of all time with some awesome expansions along the way. And because I was such a huge fan and nerd of the cyberpunk genre, I wanted nothing more than for CD Projekt to succeed in this endeavor. Years would go by with radio silence, with only rumors and snippets of information to scratch the itch for the game. Then E3 2018 happened. The first ever reveal trailer looked awesome, and on top of that, I was invited among various media outlets to check out a behind closed doors presentation of the title. And this wasn't just some video, 10 minutes long. No, this was a developer who sat down and actually played this game for an hour. And while we did come to learn that the demo turned out to be completely fake, according to CD Projekt sources and reportings from outlets like Bloomberg, the game at the time seemed very real because of the way they presented it. It wasn't a pre-recorded segment, it was live extended gameplay. And my hype only heightened throughout E3 2019 when CD Projekt showed off another awesome looking trailer, and they took the world by a storm when they surprise revealed that Keanu Reeves would be playing Johnny Silverhand in that epic E3 moment. CD Projekt also invited media outlets again to check out another closed doors presentation, once again played by the developer, and it once again looked really incredible. And it was an extended version of that 15-minute gameplay video CD Projekt released involving the Voodoo Boys and taking down the animals in Grand Imperial Mall. It was that, except instead of cut up and edited, it was the whole thing, played straight through for about an hour. And with every new gameplay footage that they unveiled with the Night City Wire events, the game just looked golden, and every time they would emphasize the game would be out when it's ready, that the company would leave the greed to others. I was just really hopeful that they would live up to that this would be the company to really spotlight how AAA developers should be. But, I guess one thing we have learned is that CD Projekt Red is really good at marketing. If there's one thing they're good at, it's that. and maybe they're too good at it. And while Cyberpunk 2077 was being hyped up by CD Projekt, I was watching AAA game after AAA game launch broken, unpolished, incomplete, and lacking integrity with awful monetization systems. So it was so refreshing to hear a AAA development studio going out of their way to continuously emphasize that they'll do right by the customers. And I fully 100% believe them. I fully believe there was no way the CD Projekt Red, after making all of those promises to the customers about their commitment to quality and integrity, would ever be led astray. I guess I don't know, sort of placed all my hopes and dreams on CD Projekt being able to show the rest of the games industry and greedy companies how it's done. I really badly wanted CD Projekt to be that beacon of light. A momentous day for Cyberpunk was June 25th, 2020, which was when CD Projekt allowed various media outlets to play a preview version of Cyberpunk 2077 for about 5 hours and allow them to share their thoughts and impressions, which were all overwhelmingly positive. Now, one thing to clarify, there are people who think that I played this demo and reported on it. I never played this demo. I wasn't invited to that event. I did release a video titled "Everyone Who Played Cyberpunk 2077 Seems Blown Away" that day. That was mainly me compiling what other outlets were saying, not sharing my own impressions. I have absolutely no idea what that build was like, how similar or different it was to the final build. I cannot speak to any of that, but I did echo what everyone else was saying, and my excitement only built further. And then came the additional months of extra hype, the additional Night City Wire events, and the numerous delays that really had me believe CD Projekt leadership was dedicated to ensuring the best quality and integrity possible for Cyberpunk. And then the review period arrived. I'd like to relay exactly what that process was like on my end. It was, without question, one of the most, if not the most, restrictive and confusing review process I've ever been a part of. On November 27th, 2020, I received an email from CD Projekt Red providing details about the review process. I was told that I'd need to sign an NDA, which is standard affair for a review process, that I'd only receive a PC code, and that my review code would be sent on December 1st. That same day, I got another email with the embargo, listing out the days and times in which I could publish my review, and this was also the document that informed me that the review published on December 7th could not show any of my own gameplay footage. I had to use gameplay footage provided by CD Projekt, and December 9th was the day I could release a review with my own gameplay footage. Now, from the outset, there were already a bunch of red flags. The fact that they were only handing out PC copies, though I assumed that maybe bigger outlets were getting the console copies, and since I'm just a YouTuber, I was only getting the PC review copy. Turned out they were not handing console copies out at all. Then there's the fact that CD Projekt didn't allow me to show my own gameplay until December 9th. And finally, CD Projekt did promise to reviewers that they would get weeks to play Cyberpunk 2077, but instead, we got just 1 week. Even with all these red flags, all my brain could say, and all my brain could think about was, holy shit, Cyberpunk 2077 is actually in my hands after all these years, since 2012. Hype, hype, hype. I'm sure CD Projekt has their reasons for why they're doing the things that they are. You know, they're the consumer-friendly company. They've promised time and again it'll be out when it's ready. You know, I assume, yeah, it probably has to do with day zero and day one patches making a huge difference and them not wanting to have footage out there that's outdated. So, yeah, I'm sure that's what it is. And now I have to get my review out before launch. Let's just sign the embargo and get started. That's how my brain perceived things at the time. A huge mistake on my end, these preconceived notions. If this were any other company or any other game, I would have no doubt scrutinized this aspect a lot more. I would have been a lot more suspicious, but I had placed this special level of trust on CD Projekt. Again, huge mistake. With the track record that they have, with the things that they've said about leaving the greed to others, being out when it's ready, believing their focus on consumer friendliness, my brain just perceived them as a studio that could do no wrong because I so badly wanted them to be that AAA studio that was the golden standard that wouldn't do anything wrong. Then came December 1st, which was the day I finally got my review copy. And well, it wasn't long before I started to notice all of the bugs. NPCs T-posing or spazzing out, objects floating in the air, you name it. And these bugs persisted from beginning to end, many of which I did spotlight in my review. But again, my brain perceived that this is CD Projekt. No way they'd ship the game in this state. The Day 0 and Day 1 patches, surely they're substantial enough. And it didn't help that CD Projekt developers, they were tweeting out how substantial these patches would be and how it was a completely different game with these patches enabled. So I really thought I was playing a much older build of the game that just wasn't representative of the final experience. And my fear was that I would put a review out there and it would be outdated the second those Day 0 and Day 1 patches launched that would maybe fix all the issues that I highlight in the review. And I especially thought this because I did have performance issues, and I thought it was on my end. I thought it was an issue with my rig. It was a case special to me because when I reached out to CD Projekt about the performance issues and ways to troubleshoot, I was basically told the equivalent of, that's weird, that's not normal, which really made me believe there was something about my rig that wasn't jiving with the game and that this was a special case for me. But after the game's launch, I would learn that these performance issues were not unique to me, that plenty of players would see similar results. And again, I believed in that Day 0 patch way too much. In large part because it was suggested to me that this is a pre-release version of the game and that the performance would greatly improve in the final product. And also, during the review, in the middle of the review process, there was an NVIDIA driver that dropped that did tangibly improve my performance. Still far from perfect, but a noticeable improvement. And then there was also a mid-review patch that dropped that did seem to fix certain bugs and issues. Not all of them, but a good amount. And so seeing the game improve during the review process, that made me believe that this Day 0 and Day 1 patch would really fix the game that much more. It really blinded me to this idea that a Day 0 and Day 1 patch would be able to fix all of these issues. When, in retrospect, again, if this were any other game or any other company, that's not how I would have seen things. And part of it was inconceivable to me that after saying it'll be out when it's ready, over and over and over again, that Cyberpunk could possibly release in an incomplete state. Now, that's not to say that I wasn't enjoying my time with the game. I was. Overall, I really was having a good time with the frustration stemming from the bugs and what I thought were technical issues that turned out to be just straight up incomplete systems. Maybe you just didn't have a good time with the game at all, and that's fine, that's fair. But for me, personally, the stuff that was complete and the stuff that did work really worked for me. But at the same time, I was rushing to get this review out on time. I wasn't being thorough. I wasn't playing the game as I would. This is a game that I had been covering for years, and I felt that to not release a review before the game's launch would be a disservice, when what I should have done was take as much time as I needed to play the game properly and fully explore all of its systems and content, and delay the review and kept people updated on that front. And the thing is, when you're rushing to get a review out, to the degree that I did with Cyberpunk, when you're shotgunning dozens upon dozens of hours of gameplay in less than a week, when you're so singularly focused on finishing the campaign before a deadline with few hours of sleep every day, you really just kind of get tunnel vision. And again, that was just my mistake for approaching this review that way. What I should have done was delay my review until after launch to make absolutely sure that the patches would fix the many problems that I encountered and complete the systems that felt incomplete. But again, I got too caught up in the hype, I got too desperate to get my review out on time, and I trusted CD Projekt too much. So then came the days that the review embargo was lifted. I decided that I'd post 2 parts to the review, one on December 7th, where I'd talk about my experience without gameplay footage of my own, and one on December 9th, where I'd show both things I loved about the game and issues that I encountered through my own gameplay footage. I did disclose in part 1 of my review that I wasn't allowed to show my own gameplay footage, that it did feel dishonest, that it felt like they were trying to hide something, but at the same time I went way too easy on the game because I had preconceived notions, because I was so deep into the hype, because I was so trusting that, by the time the game launched, everything would be fixed with the patches. Now, one thing I do want to clarify is there are some people who are saying that I gave the game a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10. I don't give out review scores ever. In the case of this review, though, I don't think I highlighted the game's key issues enough. I didn't emphasize their severity enough. And part of it was the trust that the patches would fix a lot of the qualms that I had, and that when I released my review highlighting all of the issues I encountered, it would not be representative of the final product because I was so intent on believing the final game would be just that much better. The police system was among the things that I didn't spotlight enough. I kind of highlighted it a little bit in a few seconds in the bugs section of part 2 of my review, but because I rushed through this review process, rushed through the campaign, I actually didn't end up interacting with the police a whole lot, and the few times that I did, when they'd spawn right next to me, I thought it had to be a bug that would be fixed with the patches, when it was in reality a non-existent system. With any other game, again, I would have probably seen the obvious, but I trusted in CD Projekt Red and the out when it's ready promise, again, way too much. I also should have emphasized a lot more the lackluster simulation elements like the brain-dead crowd AI, a lot more. What else? I didn't spend enough time testing out exactly how multiple endings worked, how drastic of an effect life paths actually had, which is not a whole lot. Just so many things I could have talked about in more detail and more accurately if I had not rushed my review, if I had delayed my review, if I had not released it when it wasn't ready, if I hadn't pulled my own version of CD Projekt with the release of my review. I do have to say, though, it's highly unfortunate that CD Projekt only gave reviewers a week to play and finish the game despite promising a lot more time. They did say in a tweet way back when that we would have weeks, not just less than a week, weeks. But ultimately, I could talk about all of that, but it was ultimately my decision to rush the review the way I did, despite the tight deadline. So at the end of the day, it's my fault, it's my channel, it's my content. What I upload is all ultimately on me. I shouldn't have said things like, this game lives up to my hype, no matter how much I actually did enjoy the things that did work for me when the game, again, wasn't getting in the way of itself, because the game just had way too many issues. And, when there were clearly so many red flags. There's also the fact that my review is woefully incomplete, only covering the best version of the game, the PC version, when running on a beefy hardware with a RTX 3080, no less. I was playing a version that most people wouldn't see, and even the version I was playing, the best version, is still a very compromised version. I should have waited for the console versions to launch, tested those out, and included the utter disastrous state that those versions were in my review. The thought that CD Projekt would launch the console versions of a game in such a state was just something that never crossed my mind, because at the time I perceived CD Projekt to be the gold standard. I figured there's absolutely zero possibility such a thing would happen, but it happened. So what we have here is a situation where I ultimately published a review that went way too easy on a troubled game, gave it way too much leeway, and ultimately isn't fully representative of the final experience, even now, months after launch, even after patch 1.2. And on top of my own mistakes, the review feels like a product of CD Projekt Red's own deceptions and manipulations, and I do not want to be a part of that. So moving forward, I will never give a company, a development studio, whatever, the level of special trust I gave CD Projekt ever again. No matter how great a company or studio seems, I'm going to strive my best to not see them as the golden standard, hold them up on a pedestal. That's not to say that I won't do my best to give everyone a fair chance, but I'll also do my best to just never buy into this idea that a company can do no wrong, that a development studio can do no wrong. You really never know. And I will certainly strive to never rush a review again, no matter how caught up in the hype and the deadlines I am. If the allotted time I feel isn't enough for a review period of that type of game, where maybe it's dozens upon dozens of hours, I will straight up just delay my review and keep people updated on what's going on that front. Now, I want to emphasize that I wasn't going out of my way to actively deceive. I had no freaking clue Cyberpunk would launch the way it did, and in part it had to do with how I blinded myself. But I genuinely believe the patches would work their magic and, make the final experience just something that was drastically better than even what I experienced. And there was just so much uncertainty during the review process of, is this actually the final state of the game, or are the patches really going to make such a huge difference? The fact that I released my review without making sure about those patches, that was a big mistake on my part. A lot of people have perceived my coverage after the game's launch as me flip-flopping, just following the audience. No, it's just that, a lot of new information came to light post-launch. I really got to see how everything played out post-launch. Things that I was uncertain about were made certain post-launch. And again, my own blindness played a part in the kind of coverage and the way the review was doled out. But in realizing how everything really played out, I feel like I still have to talk about what's going on with CD Projekt, hopefully this time not as blinded. I certainly did get too caught up in the hype, but also I did do coverage that would be considered negative for CD Projekt. I was among the first to talk about crunch at CD Projekt, which, at the time when CD Projekt's reputation was at its height, I got plenty of backlash for talking negatively about CD Projekt for highlighting their crunch. And the way I view things is, not in black and white. A company isn't all good and all evil. I think there's shades of gray. There's some things that they do that are good, some things that they do that are bad. Some companies more bad than good, other companies more good than bad. Even with companies like EA, they do a lot of shitty things, and I've covered a lot of that stuff, but every once in a while they do something that I go, okay, kudos on that, do more of that. My goal isn't to flip-flop and just follow what the audience is saying. My goal is to, try to rectify coverage when it needs to be rectified, and this is certainly one of the rectifications that I need to make. And I think it's safe to say that I'm not the only one who got way too caught up in the hype. The same goes for the rest of the world, but of course the difference when you're in a position like I am is that I have an audience of over 1 million people. With that kind of audience, I have a responsibility to do my best work, and I should have seen all the signs, all the red flags, and done a proper review, something that better represents the final product, something that wasn't rushed, something that wasn't so trusting, something that didn't give special treatment. These are mistakes that I have to own up to, and the hope is that from here on out, I'll remember what happened with Cyberpunk, and I will do my best to make sure something like that doesn't happen again. Now, with all that said, I do hope that Cyberpunk 2077 is able to make a No Man's Sky style comeback with upcoming updates, DLCs, and expansions. I feel like worse games have come back. Cyberpunk 2077 is a higher profile disaster because just the hype surrounding that game was unprecedented. So, that's definitely something to consider, but I don't want to rule out the possibility of this game being able to come back from all of this. And at the end of the day, after all of the fixes come out and all of the new content updates come out, be the experience that it was meant to be. I'm not assuring you that this is going to happen. I'm just saying that's what I hope. In the meantime, though, all this was a lesson hard learned, and, I'm not going to guarantee that I'm going to be a perfect human being from here on out. I'm only human. I'm going to keep making mistakes. But, point those out when those happen. And, again, I hope I'm able to look back at my own blindness and complacency, and what I should have known is a questionable review process as a reminder that I should be careful about hype and offering a special level of trust to companies. And I should be more careful about just being more thorough instead of focusing on deadlines, instead of behaving like how AAA publishers have behaved, rushing their products to launch. So yeah, that's pretty much everything I have to say. I'm deleting my reviews of Cyberpunk 2077, both parts. And yeah, I'm not looking back. I'm going to move forward, and I hope to continue to do coverage, and I hope to do better moving forward with future reviews. With that, I would like to conclude this video. I hope this offered some insight into what went on behind the scenes and the mistakes that I made and what I can do better in the future. But that's my take. Let me know in the comments below what your take is on all of this, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.